So I'm continuing part 4. Okay, one very interesting fact. The vocabulary of Dravidian. Now, look at the vocabulary of Dravidian, and I want to tell you about the Turkish one. It says here, numerous words of Dravidian can be found in Kartvelian. Forget about Kartvelian. Oh God. So, chikni, which means small. It means küçük in Turkish. It means, I think, kiçik or something like that in Hungarian. So, çiki as well. So, çiki means small in Burushaski. So, Burushaski has definitely something to do with Turkish. Yes? If Burushaski has something to do with Turkish, Dravidian is definitely related to Burushaski and Indian as well. But most probably they were under the effect of Semitic languages, and maybe Semitic vocabulary came in, and that's why the Semitic vocabulary became dominant in the language. And that's how the vocabulary a little bit slightly changed. So, we're going on. Chico or Chicho means child in Spanish. Çocuk in Turkish. Çike means girl in Albanian. You see the similarity also in Turkish? So how can you claim that these are Indo-European languages? They are not. They come from a common ancestor, from a proto-language, which was dominant for both Indo-European and Ural-Altaic. And I definitely agree, I definitely claim that Indo-European was spread years later, thousands of years later, than the common ancestor language, because of the agglutinative effect. So, how old is, as I said, Indo-European anyway? So the ancestor language was actually the language before the Semitic languages had an effect on the southern Asian continent. Right. So we have vocabulary like this. Okay, here we have the contact. As I said, the Scythians and the Finno-Ugric people, they were horse riders, and most probably in ancient times, as I said, they had contact with the Indians, Dravidians, etc. So the steppe people, yes, shortly, the steppe people and the southern Asians, they came together, they married, and these people then formed the Proto-Russians, the Slavs in Europe, the God. I mean, what else can be possible? That was the way how they spread to Europe. the Slavs, I mean, and the Indo-European languages. But before that, of course, um, Southern Asia had to be in contact with the Semitic people. So the Semitic languages affected very heavily the Sumer land, the Hittite land. So everywhere, Semitic effect was everywhere. Southern Asia and even Central Asia. Yeah, because I know Arabs who, I mean, even in the Seljuk times, Turks had to collaborate with the Arabs, and I know from history that the Arabs never kept their promise, and Turks had hard times with the Arabs. So that's what I can say. Actually, I have to do a study on Tamil and Dravidian and Turkish, comparing the vocabulary. So if I can prove this, um, I will definitely claim that there is no such language like Indo-European. Because if there is a, I mean, if there is a common ancestor of these languages, why do you divide them? There is no reason to divide uh, Uralic languages, Altaic languages, uh, Indo-European languages, and the other rest. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Um, it's complex. It's complex. If I were a scholar, an important scholar, I would definitely change the family trees. And instead of putting Indo European to the front, I would put agglutinative proto language to the front. Or ancient North Eurasian agglutinative language to the front. And then I would continue. I would say Proto Uralic Altaic, together with mixtures of Ket, Siberian languages next to it. And after that, I would put Ural-Altaic, and later I would divide this into Indo-European. So an Indo-European would be a very small branch. No, I wouldn't call it Indo-European, I would call it Slavic. I would call it, I wouldn't even call it Germanic or British or whatever. I would only call it Slavic or uh, um, I mean, yeah, I would. The start of that language would be Proto-Russian, and then it would be Slavic. Then I would put Indian to it. No, would I put Indian to it? Yeah. Um, Indian and Persian would be in between the agglutinative in the agglutinative uh, Ural-Altaic languages and between the, yeah, I would put them in between. That's what I would do. So Siberian languages definitely would come on top and not Indo-European. So there were mainly two dominant languages. In the past, the oldest language was Ural-Altaic, which we know today of. They have definitely something more in common than the Indo-European languages. They are more related to each other, even though they are thousands of miles apart. If you consider so-called Indo-European, Indian, for example, or if you consider French and German, for example, or if you consider even Slavic languages, they are so different from each other that you cannot make out what it means. But you can catch up vocabulary from Indian, for example, in Asia. You can catch up vocabulary from Hungarian, which you can make out. You can catch up vocabulary from the Turkic languages, and you can understand them, even though they are thousands of miles apart. That's interesting. Some scholar called Devanayan said that he would place the homeland of Dravidian to Mesopotamia. Because he thinks that the Dravidians went to Egypt, Mesopotamia, North Africa, Anatolia, Western Europe. Wow, they traveled to so many places. I mean, definitely they had a dark complexion, etc. But were Dravidians really Mediterranean pre-Indo-European people? I mean, did they really go everywhere? And it says here they have something to do with Basque. The Dravidians? No. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Dravidians are totally different. They have a different complexion. I mean, if it was Central Asians, I would understand. If you said, okay, Central Asians went to Egypt, Mesopotamia, North Africa, they went to Anatolia and Western Europe, I would understand it. But Dravidians, it doesn't make sense. Their type is different. Their type is different. They have different phenotypes. Okay, maybe one thing, but I have to research it, as I said. Maybe Dravidians came together with the Ural-Altaic Sumerians, with the Turkic group, with the Proto-Turkish group, and they formed the Sumerian culture. That could be possible. Yes, okay, but I'm not sure. I haven't made a research on that. I have to make a research on that. So it says here also the Dravidian languages have something together with the Anglo-Saxon and Germanic languages. Nah. No, I don't think so. the Germanic languages. I mean, they are Slavic, French, okay, English. I mean, they came from India, he says. I have to make a research on that, as I said. Okay, it can be possible that Dravidian has common words in Burushaski, okay. But why isn't it Burushaski that went on a trip to Europe? Why wasn't it somebody else in Central Asia? Why wasn't it a related Central Asian community that went to Europe? And why was it the Dravidians? I mean, no. As I said, it must have been the Proto-Turks, Proto-Uralic, Altaic, agglutinative speakers who first domesticated the wolf, and then they domesticated the horse, and with that they spread their language. They took women as wives, and they most probably went to other places which was uninhabited by people in that area, because Europe in those times was not that inhabited. If you considered India and China, it was full of people, most probably, and they needed land. And land was not much, inhabited in Europe. So they most probably went further west. That's most probably what they did. And to Anatolia, of course. That's why we are all related. We have so many common things. Also, common vocabulary with Indo-European, and also common vocabulary with Ural-Altaic. Our language family is Altaic, is Ural-Altaic. So, and if you consider the root, there most probably was one family, or let's say one family with a mixture of Slavic words and a mixture of Turkic words. And that's why people were able to understand each other. And later it derived. I know there is Indian admixture in Iran. They have southern Indian DNA. That's what I know. There is more southern Indian DNA in Persia. That's what I know. And in the Kurds. The Kurds have also more southern Indian DNA. And it might be possible that it comes from the Indians and from the Dravidians, most probably. Yeah, but in the Caucasus, I don't think it's affected the Caucasus. I think the Caucasus was more affected by the American Indians and the Nadeni people. I mean, it had more effect from Central Asia. That's what I think that the Caucasus was affected by. I mean, Iran and Persia is a mixture. It is a mixture of the Turks and most probably the Indians and the Semitic people. So it has three mixtures actually. That's why it is so versatile. So, and even now Anatolia, you can add Mediterranean people, which are darker, um, and of course the Balkans and European people, which have lots of Turkic DNA and European DNA. Oh, it's continuing. Oh God. So here we have the language families, the Eurasian language family. I'm sorry, but I'm skipping this because I don't agree. Because they're splitting the Uralic and Altaic family. That's not good. It is not right to split this ancient family. You owe your language to this family. You owe your language to this family. That's why you shouldn't split it. You should never forget where your ancestors came from. And your ancestors definitely were not European. That's what I think about Indo-European. If Europe is considered okay to be European, I think Siberian is more European than Indo-European itself. So maybe we should make a new family tree. That's what I think. Very interesting. Here we have Kosintsev, and he made a study on the Danic Caucasian macro family. And he thinks that there is one root of the Danic Caucasian family, and we have an Eurasian family here, right? And he also includes Dravidian here. He doesn't see Dravidian as an Indo-European language because he puts Indo-European into a different branch. So where is Uralic, Altaic? That's interesting. So he put one root, and he said, okay, Dravidian, Kartvelian, Indo-European, Uralic, Yukagir, Kamchatkan, Escalate, Altaic, Yeniseian, Burushaski, North Caucasian, Basque, Sino-Tibetan, and Nadene are all coming from the same root. So that's more logical than, it is not a correct family tree, but it is better than the current family tree that we know, that everything stems from Indo-European. Oh God. So this is more logical. So it is not correct, but this is more logical. But one thing, if you consider Indo-European one language, you should not. If you consider, for example, Sino-Tibetan and Nadeni one language, you should not separate the North Caucasus and the South Caucasus, for example, or you should not separate Altaic and Uralic. You should put it together, right? There are mistakes here. And for example, if you separate the Dravidian, you should also separate the Indian languages out of the Indo-European, because what does Indo mean here? Indo has nothing to do with European. I mean, European languages are the Slavic languages, right? And the Indian languages and the Dravidian languages, I would put them together, the Indian and Dravidian languages. And then I would separate them according to subject, object, verb, and subject, verb, object. That's it. And I would do this for all the languages. So, as I said, Kozintsev came up with a study, and he puts the Eurasian languages and the Danic-Caucasian languages together, and he says that these Eurasian families and the Danic-Caucasian families were in southern Siberia, which is logical. Yes? So the root of this actually comes to my idea. I mean, this was my idea, that I said it was in Siberia, in Altai. I mean, so southern Siberia. It can also be Kazakhstan, of course, Central Asia. Yes, that's also what I said. So either southern Siberia and eastern Kazakhstan was the root of the families. This is where all the families had their stem. And then macro families started to be born. Well, this makes more sense than the current family tree that we know. So there were the other families. I don't mention the details, but this is more plausible. This is more logical. Right. This is nice. So there is another chart here. I'm skipping this because it's also similar to, I mean, it is more detailed, but again, it divides the Altaic families with the Uralic families. Where is Uralic? God. Here, Yukagir, etc. So, Hungarian is definitely not, or, I mean, Hungarian is closer to Turkish, to the Turkic families, than Finnish. So if you think of Turkish, or the Turkic families, it is definitely not close to Mongolian, because Hungarian and Finnish are as far as Turkic to Mongolian. It's both. And Hungarian is closer to Turkish in this respect. So you see the difference. If you look at Indo-European, I think SKR is Sanskrit. Is that right? Oh God. Iranian, I know, German. So you cannot put German and Iranian close, and you cannot divide Uralic and Altaic, because Turkish and Hungarian is more similar than German and Iranian. Definitely. And think of Greek. I mean, Greek and German, how similar are they? I can understand Slavic languages, right? They are very similar. But what about the others? Looking at this paragraph, my idea is that there was, especially in Asia, where the Turkic languages are spoken, and also the Proto-Turkic languages that were dominant in those regions. If you consider Sumerian, it was close to it was agglutinative, and it had common vocabulary with the Chuvash language, which is Turkic, Western Turkic. So it was under the effect of the Uralic part, Sumerian, I mean. It was also under the effect of the Altaic part. So it had these influences, together with many Turkish and Chuvash words. It most probably had also Dravidian and Indian vocabulary in it, but the structure was agglutinative. It also had prefixes because of Semitic influence. So people used clay tablets, but the clay tablets, they came from Central Asia. I think they started to use clay tablets in Central Asia, or they used China in one area of Central Asia, I think. And from there, they came over to the Sumerian region, where the Sumerians used it. So I strongly think that this was one common culture, or one culture was the predecessor of another, or a post culture of another. So it started all in the Altais, and including the Urals, the Ural Altais. It spread to Sumer. From Sumer, it spread to the Hittites. Hittites had a Semitic effect because of the Semitic peoples, most probably because of the Dravidians and the Indians. and also because of the Egyptians, right? They had lots of relationships with the Egyptians, and most probably their languages also got affected. I think Egyptian is a Semitic language, although they are not Arabs. Most probably because of the region, they spoke, I think, Semitic. I'm not sure of that. So one culture was the predecessor of another in that region, and it stretched to Anatolia. It stretched to Greece, and it stretched to the Balkans and Europe, and you see the resemblance, you see the connection. But sometime later, most probably, the word structure changed in the European languages, and it became subject, verb, object. And most probably, the vocabulary was brought from Iran to Europe, or it was brought from the Slavic languages. I mean, Russian, Proto-Russian, and these kinds of people to Europe, further Europe, and most probably Indian languages. I mean, the people of India, they came into contact with the Central Asians, and because of the marriages, let's say, they took the language with them, and this is how slightly different vocabulary was formed in these regions. And okay, it molded actually, and it changed slightly. That's why we find still common vocabulary and close vocabulary between the languages, even though they are far from each other. If you consider some Asian languages, and they have connections with Japanese, for example. So it still means they are related, or they had a common ancestor in the past, speaking the same language. So this is true for agglutinative languages as well, and ancient North Eurasians. Most probably the ancestor of Ural-Altaic was the ancient North Eurasians, before Indo-European was even born. You see here the Balto-Slavic languages and their age. It is only 5,500 BCE. Whereas if you have a look at the Ural-Altaic languages, they are far more stretching beyond. I would say 10,000 years ago. So okay, it says here Çatalhöyük was Dravidian. Oh God. I would not be so sure, because Çatalhöyük was mixed with Siberian or Central Asian, or parts of Asia, but not Dravidian, I would say. Yes, Çatalhöyük went further to, I mean, the communities of Çatalhöyük, they went further to the west, and they formed the Balkans. That's what they did. And from there to Europe. So these languages were definitely Proto-Turkic, Proto-Uralic Turkic. Maybe not Uralic, but okay, let's say Proto-Uralic, Proto-Uralic and Altaic. And very close to Turkish. That's what I would say. Because of the DNA as well. If you have a look at the DNA, it also says something about the genetic gene pool. It says here the French genetic gene pool consists of Anatolian and Basque origin. So Basque might also be Caucasian. That's what Edward Wyder said. Yes, yes. So he is right. He is right. Now, there is a scholar who is the same opinion with me, and he said that oh God. Witzel was the person who said that the Burushaski language in northern Pakistan, so Burushaski is in northern Pakistan, as I said. I said something about Pakistan and Afghanistan, right? And the Burushaski language, which is close to Turkish, close to a Turkic family, has features of Dravidian, Sanskrit, and Caucasian languages. What does this mean? This means the Burushaski language can be the ancestor of the Indo-European languages. But why would it be the ancestor? Burushaski is closer to Turkish. But it's better to say that Burushaski is the predecessor of the Indo-European languages. But the term Indo-European is not good. Maybe it is better to say Burushaski is the predecessor of Slavic languages. Yeah, I would put the name for Indo-European Slavic. That's it, one word, Slavic. Yeah. Okay, and then we have also other scholars which relate Burushaski to other languages, but I'm skipping this. I'm skipping this part because it would be really too detailed if I continued this part. Okay, now Kvork said that there was a major role of Central Eurasia, this means Central Asia, Iran, and Caucasus, in the transmission of genes. This is important. The peoples with the most diversified genes as the Uyghurs, Azeris, Uzbeks, Iranians, they carry roughly equal genetic contributions from the Middle East, Europe, China, and India. So this is correct. And most of these cultures, they contributed to the European languages. That's what I would say. I don't call them Indo-European. So this means that Anatolian genes, they have 40% of, okay, they consist of 40% hunter-gatherer. I mean, the people in Göbekli Tepe. So, or is it the modern gene? I'm not sure. So Indian genes are 20% in Iran. So in Iran they have 20%. That means Southern Asia contributed to the Persian populations, to the Tajik populations, to the Russian populations, to the Kurdish populations as well, and fourteen percent to the Caucasus and 5% to the European people. So this is the ancient hunter-gatherer, right? No, it's not the ancient hunter-gatherer. It's the Indian gene. So Indian genes, Europe doesn't have much Indian genes. It only has 5%. So why does it claim it is from the Aryan race? Now, if it were Iran, I would understand. But Europe, only 5%. Look, something very important. Arctic and Siberian genes mostly spread in northeastern Europe. So it says here 15%, but I'm sure it was more. I mean, especially in Hungary. Okay, and then we have African genes, where it says African genes spread more in southern Europe. That means in Italy, etc. So Italy, when we say Italy, when we say the Mediterranean, we should consider African genes, as for example in Spain and also in Greece, I would say. And if you have a look at the Neolithic migration from India and Central Asia to the Caucasus, it would be added that Anatolia and Europe and the Balkans and Northern Africa would be also added here. So again, Neolithic migration from India means, oh, sorry, so sorry. It says here there is a theory that says that Neolithic migration from India and Central Asia to the Caucasus was present, and a migration wait a minute. This study strengthens the theory of a major Neolithic migration from India and Central Asia to the Caucasus, Anatolia, and Europe by the Balkans and Northern Africa. So, Northern Africa and the Balkans had oh God, I can't concentrate. The last sentence. I read you the sentence. The rest is history. Okay, so I think I have to stop it here. No, I don't want to stop, because it's talking about the Turkmens here. So again, haplogroups. Imagine Central Asia. It has mostly the haplogroup Q, and haplogroup Q is mostly present in the Turkmens, 30% Turkmens, right? So they are also present in the Iranians, so 43% in Iranians. That means there are about 40% Turkmens in Iran. What does this mean? When you say Iranian, you have to be careful. And there is, of course, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, there are also Turkmens. So even in the United Kingdom, we have haplogroup Q, which is about 8%. I didn't know that. So, haplogroup Q. What does it say here? Okay, it means that from Azerbaijan, people went to the United Kingdom. Yeah, it could be possible. And if you look at France, the haplogroup P, Q, and R, the frequency is 3.4%. The Croatian islands is 14.3%. Haplogroup K is 7.4%. Haplogroup P, haplogroup F is 4.9%. And in Serbia. This is in Serbia. Okay. I'm almost finished. I'm not sure what I'm going to... It's getting actually more and more interesting here towards the end. Now, have a look. It says here, Central Asia appears to have a serious effect. I mean, it is the candidate of the original homeland. So Central Asia is the homeland of the ancestor of the Indo-Europeans, Dravidians, and Caucasian languages. It says Burushaski, which could have come from the Altai, brings Altaic linguistic elements. It brings the haplogroup R1a and haplogroup R1b, which originated in southern Siberia and spread to Europe. So, what does this mean? This means that Burushaski is actually the language, the ancestor language of the Central Asian communities that spread both the Dravidian, Caucasian, Indo-European languages. So it has to have a common ancestor with the Nadene and Caucasian languages then. Burushaski. They call it Burushaski, but it is Proto-Turkic because it has Altaic influences. So if it has Altaic influences and if it has haplogroups R1a and R1b, if it has originated from southern Siberia, if it spread to Europe, it must have had something in common with Hungarian as well, the Scythians as well, the Proto-Scythians as well. So anyway, it is the ancestor language. That's what I would say. It is the ancestor language of all Indo-European languages then. And it has something more in common with the Altai. So I would put then Burushaski to the top. If it is a living language, of course. Yeah, why not? It's logical. So that's good. So Dravidian actually is then Central Asian, right? Caucasian is then Central Asian. Indo-European is then Central Asian. That's what I claimed on my last video. And here we have it. It is Central Asian origin. I mean, Indo-European has nothing to do with Indian and European. It has to do with the Altai region then. I mean, it is the proto. I mean, the most ancestor language was most probably an Altaic language in the Altai, in southern, what was it? Southern Siberia. So have a look at Uzbekistan, Pamir, and Altai, and the haplogroups. It goes on, this Serbia, etc., etc. So I'm skipping these. We have the idea. We have the idea. And then we go on with haplogroups, etc., etc. So we found it now. Yes, we found the ancestor language. It comes from the Altai. It goes on with haplogroups and how many percentage the haplogroups consist of. So I'm skipping this. Now that's interesting. Spencer Wells said there is genetic and linguistic links between the Brits, Basques, Czechs, Slovaks, Greeks, Armenian, Turkmen, Pamirian, Yagnobis, and the crucial role of migrations from Central Asia. So in ancient times, most probably, there was such a connection. There was such a connection because there is common vocabulary between the Brits and the Turks that you sometimes you turn to a common ancestor. Basques as well, The Czechs. So that's why the Czechs are so dark. So they have maybe a far relative, the Slovaks. The Greeks, definitely. The Armenians, definitely. They have related vocabulary, as well as the Persians. I think it goes back to the Persians that they have a common vocabulary. And of course, ancient Anatolia. Most probably the Proto-Anatolian communities. Here we can talk about Çatalhöyük and Göbekli Tepe. And these communities had connections with Central Asia. Yes. So, if you look at Bulgarian, Macedonian, Albanian, etc., so the Slavic languages, the Bulgarian languages, actually, they have something with Turkic languages. So here, if Burushaski was the ancestor language, Macedonian, Albanian, and the other languages were definitely connected. But Bulgarian is not in this group. Bulgarian is of Turkic origin. I mean, Bulgars are Turks. Thracians are Turks. And here he calls them the Pamirian languages. They're not Pamirian languages. This is a mistake. He's mixing up the languages here. I mean, this shouldn't happen actually. And then it goes on. So, a very interesting fact here is that a common vocabulary here, and the words, the common words, the articles the Balkan languages have, and the Slavic vocabulary that was taken from Burushaski, Central Asian languages. So the agriculture vocabulary and pastoralism vocabulary from Central Asia was actually taken from the East Europeans. I mean, Hungary brought it to Europe. It actually wasn't Pakistan, or it wasn't Dravidian. It was taken from the Hungarians, and the Europeans started using it. So here we have, for example, goats, which were brought to France, and they were carrying the genes from Central Asia and Pakistan. So as a conclusion, we can say the migration which was brought to Europe had actually an archaic Eurasian family. a language family, an archaic family, which showed features of European languages. I mean, I cannot say European languages, but they showed features of an archaic form of Indian words, Anatolian words, Elamite words, Dravidian words, but mostly Altaic, Burushaski words, Caucasian words from the family, and these all, especially Burushaski, it says, affected the Slavic languages then. And then it says Indo-Hittite. Oh God, come on, what's Indo-Hittite? So I explained Hittite before. Semitic influences, that's what I say. So if Indian had Semitic vocabulary, if Persian had Semitic vocabulary in it, this means that after a certain time, the Jews, the Semitic languages, the Arabs, they all came over to this peninsula, to this area, and they actually took over the culture, which also was dominant in Europe. This means that Europe mixed with Semitic people. That's what I can say. Actually, Europe mixed more with Semitic people than with Asian people, because Asia, the language has stayed in the same structure, while Europe changed into the Semitic structure, subject, verb, object, especially Italy, especially Greece and France and Spain. So let's summarize slowly and come to a conclusion. I can actually agree with Cassian, who said that the Eurasian languages stem from an original Eurasian language. That's what I said, which included the Samoyedic languages from Siberia and split between 18,000 and 8,000 BCE. My theory is also consistent with Pagel Atkinson, who postulates that the 7 language families of Eurasia form a linguistic superfamily, which evolved from a common ancestor around 15,000 years ago, with a homeland in Central Asia. With a homeland in Central Asia, from which Dravidian, Kartvelian, and Basque were the first to separate. So they separated, it says, followed by Proto-Indo-European 8,700 years ago, which contradicts with the theory of Kurgans. Of course it contradicts with the theory of Kurgans. Yes. So I agree with the theory of Cassian, that there was a proto-family, a Eurasian language, and it was formed in Siberia, and from there these language families evolved. But there was one mother Altaic family, of course, one ancient Altaic family, agglutinative, which had common vocabulary. most of which was Turkic. And most of it had the same structure, and it keeps the structure. So, yes, let's come to a conclusion. As I said, I have to finish it here and turn to part 4.